Combat Sports. Hello everyone and thanks for tuning in. This is your UFC 226 post-fight analysis. Yesterday was an absolute dynamite card and the matchups did not disappoint. Let's kick this off and talk about the superb, impeccable display of skills attributed to the new heavyweight champion Daniel Comier, knocking out Stipe Miocic in the second round. Now let's talk about how does this accomplishment place his name as one of the all-time greats in the UFC. Before joining the UFC, he campaigned at heavyweight in the Strikeforce organization, never losing a round, undefeated. He came over to the UFC and he campaigned at light heavyweight just because his good friend Cain Velasquez, and he basically said he would never fight him. So he campaigned at light heavyweight for those reasons and those reasons alone. The fight last night in the first round basically showed both combatants, Stipe Miocic and Daniel Comier, just basically finding their range. Both was landing effective scoring punching and basically establishing distance. Wasn't too much clinching or wrestling, any takedowns in the first round. Then it came to the second round, and you must say to yourself, well, it only went 2 rounds. How is it so much of a impeccable fight? What went down in this particular venture was a mega fight. Both were champions. Stipe Miocic is pretty much one of those guys who had been campaigning at that weight. He was considered one of the best heavyweights to do it. He defended his belt 3 times, and for many, it was going to be a tall task for Daniel Comier to get the job done, and that he did. He went in there and he played a little cat and mouse in the second round. He was able to allow Stipe Miocic to get a little comfortable in closing the distance because Miocic was landing a little bit. And once he did close the distance in the clinch in the middle of the cage, Daniel Comier, who had a right overhook, a left overhook, he changed it. He slipped that left to a left underhook to set up a punch. And that punch came when Stipe decided to exit the clinch and create distance. And Comier said nope, caught him with a nice crushing right hand, dropped him to the canvas, and by the time his head hit the canvas, someone of a high caliber wrestler pedigree as Comier was on top of him landing punches, and the referee had no means whatsoever except to stop the fight. It was an absolutely deserving stoppage. Superb win for DC. It only further solidified his legacy in the UFC as being one of the all-time great fighters. Okay, I mean, if you look at his travels up to this point, his light heavyweight accomplishments was always attached to that of John Jones. Now winning his heavyweight, he's basically the sole proprietor of that achievement. No one can extract that in any type of conversation. Daniel Comier is legit one of the best UFC fighters to grace the octagon. He is an absolute phenom at what he does. Olympic caliber tier wrestler, high skill striker, and very underrated just because of his height and his body composition. But with that said, salute to the champ. The only other fighter in the UFC to ever accomplish this at the same time was Conor McGregor at the lightweight and featherweight division. Now Daniel Comier has did it at the light heavyweight division and heavyweight. So salute, great win, knocking out Miocic in the second round. And from what it looks like for the post-fight when he grabbed the microphone once again, was that the future matchup is between him and WWE superstar and prior UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. So look forward to that matchup. It should absolutely be another dynamite impact and only further cement Daniel Cormier's legacy. Moving on to the undercard, the co-main was the worst card on that night. All right, we had Francis Ngannou versus Derrick Lewis. Now Francis Ngannou, he went viral and his stock really excelled when he knocked out Alistair Overeem, a veteran and it seems like he almost decapitated the fighter. And he knocked him out to a point where people were saying he has serious power, comparing him to Mike Tyson. He's the Mike Tyson of MMA and everything. But for myself, I never saw him as such because I just felt he needed a lot of his game to work on. And when you look at it in that perspective, the fighters, they might have one good solid moment, but you look at the competition in Alistair Overeem, he had been finished already. So it really wasn't a big deal with him knocking out someone who Stipe Miocic had even finished in his career, and several other fighters. Derek Lewis came out. He was pressing the issue. Like I said in my preview, he is very, very much improving. And he was executing a switch kick yesterday for a guy his size, which I absolutely enjoyed seeing him add new wrinkles to his game. It wasn't even a situation where they was in a clinch, where it was a takedown. The fight for 3 rounds was the worst heavyweight contention that I've ever seen in the UFC. Ngannou failed to press forward, failed to basically execute strikes. I think in the second round, the punch stat, he had only basically thrown maybe 2 punches to that. I'm not totally sure of the numbers, but it was preposterous, man. It was just a horrendous showing from someone who was supposedly be on the ascension up in the sport in that division as being the next guy. That went out the window. And then you had Derek Lewis, who allegedly had back ailments. He is known to have back problems, but he was still trying to fight, land punches, and do what he had to do. But ultimately, the one who had his hand raised in the decision was Derek Lewis. Which it was well deserved. Next on the card was Paul Felder against Mike Perry. This was the card that took the show. I mean, this when it really started to heat up, in the middle of the night. I mean, these two guys went at it. It was a blood fest. It was an absolutely slugfest. It was every type of fest that you can imagine without alcohol content being involved. These guys was inebriated on their own blood. They was hydrated. They kept throwing punches. I mean, the skill and technical display between these guys and adversity. It was so much adversity going on with both guys. First of all, was scoring effectively. You're talking about landing elbows, punches, not to mention the first frame of the 10 seconds of the first round, both fighters were cut open with the headbutt, and once they started bleeding, it was on from there. And Mike Perry had changed camps prior to competing against Paul Felder, which he said he needed to improve his game. And hey, I agree with him. Mike Perry came in there and I was like, he looks really much improved. What I mean by that, he seemed more patient in how he was executing his offense. He is absolutely a guy who has no problem with confidence, courage, moving forward, taking punishment. And so does Paul Felder. And both was just using spinning techniques, kicks. They's really setting up superb combinations. I mean, it was absolutely a show that, MMA fans and fight fanatics would basically yearn for each and every time they paid their money to go see these fights. It was one of those contests where I think Felder hurt his hand in the second round, his right hand, and he wasn't able to actually, be at 100% when they was in a clinch, because there was a lot of clinching going on. But Paul Felder demonstrated that he's a warrior. He did what he had to do to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And even with the broke hand, it was still spurts in there. When he was shooting the right uppercut, he was still using the spinning technique, which he did catch Perry several times, even when his hand was hurt. What arsenal that he was depleted from, he basically compensated by using his kicks, his left hand. I mean, the guy was able to throw elbows whenever given the moment. And then look at Mike Perry. Mike Perry was very comfortable in there. he kind of matched wits for wits. He used his own spinning techniques, kicks. When they was in the clinch, it was pretty much a grimy infighting where these fighters was thinking in there. Every time they created space and separated, something was being thrown. Either Mike Perry was trying to land his right elbow over the top, or Paul Felder was trying to basically punch out of the clinch, knees. I mean, the entire package when it comes to striking, that's what you've seen against these guys. You're talking about in the deep waters. Both were split open, bleeding. Such a high impact fight. I'm surprised. I'm not sure. I haven't looked it up, but it should have been fight of the night. It should have been fight of the night. Absolutely superb performance. I enjoyed it from the opening bell. I was a fan of Felder, still is. I actually predicted that he would win the bout. But when I saw Mike Perry, how patient he was in executing his combinations, I was absolutely a fan. I was like, this dude, as far as his brash bravado goes and his persona, the way he talked trash, the dude, he just truly loves to get in there and fight and throw hands. That's what he's about. That's who he is. He's the type of guy you would want hanging out with you when you go into that particular place where you just don't understand what your audience is going to be and the safety percentages of how long you're going to be there before something happens. That's the guy you want with you, because he's going to go in there and fight it out to the end, no matter what. He's that grimy of a dude. He's hardcore, and salute to both of these guys. Absolutely superb fight. I truly enjoyed it, as did other fight fans on that night. Then next we had Anthony Pettis against Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa, as you probably know, like I mentioned before, his last bout was called off due to him being unfortunately located in the front seat when Conor McGregor was trying to locate some of the team members that cornered Artem, one of his teammates, in the corner, and was talking trash, Team Khabib. So he took it upon himself with 20 of his hoodlum friends to go in there, and he wanted to toss a dolly through the window, which cut Chiesa. So he was pulled out of that bout, and it's been since in the process of litigation. The good thing is he returned to fight against Anthony Pettis, who was once on the top of the food chain, champion, ran into some difficulties as if the game caught up with him. Like, he changed his style of fighting up, and then it just didn't work out for him with the opponents, and he went on a losing streak. He just wasn't consistent as he was. But guess what? This is Anthony Showtime Pettis, and boy, did he show out last night. He taught Chiesa a lesson, almost like both of these guys are pretty thorough on the ground, but Anthony Pettis was on a different level. If you look back, he subbed Benson Henderson when both was at their peak, their prime. He subbed some guys, no problem. His jiu-jitsu game is legit, and he showed that every single time he was on his back from the bigger. If you looked at Chiesa, he missed weight, and he was extremely the bigger guy, but it didn't matter with Anthony Pettis. He went in there, and every time he was on his back, he was working. He was basically throwing his legs up for an arm bar. He was basically trying to work his position to half guard. He never really stayed in full guard at all. You can always tell the good ones when they're not there resting in full guard and holding the neck and trying to stabilize their opponent that's on top. No, Anthony Pettis, he was grabbing the arm, throwing up his legs, and then when he finally was able to get some type of control from Chiesa, he was able to lock in a triangle. Didn't have it in all the way until he reached over, hooked his leg, was able to better fit his foot behind the knee and get that triangle nice and tight. And by that time, when he was able to pull back and Chiesa dropped to his shoulder, it was in. It was cinched in pretty tight, and he ended up tapping. Chiesa ended up tapping out. Nice sub. Nice, very nice sub. And, nothing I can say about that except salute to Anthony Pettis for getting back on the winning track, because his brother Sergio has been on fire. So it's good to see Anthony Pettis back on track, man. This is what we want to see from Showtime. The way he used to be, he used to go in there and his ground game was a threat. So, good deal, man. 2 superb fights back with these guys. You had Paul Felder and Mike Perry, and then you had Michael Chiesa and Anthony Showtime Pettis. The last card, the last fight I'm going to talk about was the one with Gohan Saki and Khalil Roundtree Jr. And my prediction was Roundtree because I just thought he was a much stronger fighter out of the 2. Saki, prior kickboxer, very high skilled in that genre of discipline. I just think he wouldn't have enough for Roundtree, and he did not. Roundtree basically established his dominance early on. He let it be known that if you're going to throw your strikes, which is Saki is known for, throwing punches in bunches, and he came out to close the distance quickly in Saki. But Roundtree caught him with a counter left right on the chin, dropped him, and at first Roundtree just stood there waiting for the ref. The ref didn't stop it, and then he went over there and finished the job. Easy win for Roundtree. I'm glad to see him being such a low-key guy. Not many fans are really propelling him or putting his name out there in the conversation as being one of the best in that division, but he is. And what he did post-fight is said, "What's up? Let's go. I'm ready. When am I going to start getting a high-caliber opponent, a top-tier ranking opponent? I'm ready. Let's go. Get my name in your mouth. Start talking about me, because I'm going to show up and show out." And I believe him. So, yeah. Not too bad, man. 3 of my predictions was right out of the 5. So I'm happy with that. Overall, the showstopper of the night, of course, was Daniel Comier. And then below that, just a lethargic, land of nod, sleeper, very boring fight between Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis. One of the most horrendous fights I've seen. Lacked action, dense, empty room. The crowd was booing the entire time. And then next, Paul Felder, Mike Perry, man, dynamite, fireworks. It was a caveat past Independence Day. It was a show. And if I'm guessing right, they should have got fight of the night. Then Anthony Pettis against Michael Chiesa. Anthony got back on track. Good to see him, dialing it back in. Congrats. And then last, Saki and Roundtree. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing Roundtree get back in the groove and fight another opponent, but this time someone that may be in the top 10. Okay, someone that's, that he can have on his resume that Dana White and the matchmakers may say, yeah, Khalil Roundtree Jr. is ready for a top 5 opponent. So that is my breakdown, people. Thank you once again for tuning in to World Combat Sports, and follow me on all social media outlets, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel and smash that like button. Share the vids. Hey, it's much appreciated. Salute to you all. Once again, World Combat Sports.